some new leads in the fatal shooting of a young mother and her 3-week-old baby. This happened 6 weeks ago.
She called 911 after pulling the trigger. Think about that for a second. She fired the gun, walked back into the hallway, picked up her phone, and dialed for help for the sister she just killed. September 24, 2022, Fresno, California. Police push open a bedroom door and find 18-year-old Yanelly Solorio-Rivera lying on her bed. Her 3-week-old daughter, Celine, is still in her arms. Both shot, both gone. No forced entry, no robbery, no sign of a struggle. Just silence and a 22-year-old standing in the hallway saying she heard shots. That woman is Yanelly, the older sister, the one who made the call. And from the moment detectives walk through that door, something doesn't add up. The locks are untouched, the house is still, and the only person with access to that bedroom is already inside. What would make a sister do this? What kind of hatred lives quietly inside a family, hidden behind shared meals and Sunday mornings, until one day it doesn't? Stay with me, because this story doesn't get easier, it gets darker. You're watching The Exposed Crime. We tell the stories that need to be told. Domestic violence, toxic relationships, and the lives lost behind closed doors. No sugarcoating, no excuses, just the truth. If you're new here, subscribe and join us as we shed light on stories. The call came in at 7:14 in the morning. "My sister's been shot. Please hurry." No screaming, no gasping, just a voice, measured, careful, holding itself together in a way that made the dispatcher pause. Grief sounds a certain way, raw, uncontrolled, like someone trying to speak through water. This didn't sound like grief. It sounded like someone reading from a script they'd already rehearsed. Officers arrive within minutes. The street is quiet. The front door is intact. No shattered glass, no kicked-in frame, no signs that anyone forced their way into this house. Nothing broken, nothing disturbed. Inside the bedroom, they find Yanelly, 18 years old, a mother for exactly 21 days. She's lying on her back, her newborn daughter Celine resting against her chest, the way a mother holds a sleeping baby, the way you hold something precious and fragile and entirely yours. Both shot, multiple times, close range, the kind of shots that don't happen from a doorway, the kind that require standing directly over someone and choosing not to stop. Yanelly is already in the living room giving her statement. She heard shots from another room. She didn't see anyone leave. She thinks maybe someone had a grudge. Maybe it came from outside. She gestures toward the street with the confidence of someone pointing investigators in the wrong direction. Detectives nod, write everything down, then walk back to the front door, still locked, still undisturbed, and start doing the math. In the first hours of a homicide, investigators are building a picture not of what happened, but of what couldn't have happened. Every detail that gets eliminated narrows the field. No forced entry eliminates the stranger theory. No robbery eliminates opportunistic crime. No disturbance in the hallway eliminates a chaotic, unplanned attack. What's left is deliberate, calculated, inside. Whoever stood in that bedroom knew the house, knew which room, knew she'd be asleep. They walked in, stood over a mother and her 3-week-old daughter, and fired until it was done. And then they called 911. By the mid-morning, the search for a suspect has quietly stopped pointing toward the street. It's pointing down the hallway, toward the calm voice on the recording, toward the woman who knew exactly where that bedroom was because she'd walked past it every single day. Before she was a victim, she was a daughter, a sister, a teenager who had just become a mother. Yanelly Solorio-Rivera was 18 years old. By most accounts, quiet, the kind of person who didn't take up too much space in a room, who moved through life without a lot of noise or drama. Friends described her as warm, family remembered her as gentle, and 3 weeks before her death, she had become someone's entire world. Celine was born in early September 2022. Tiny, healthy, the kind of newborn that makes everyone in the family want to turn holding her, want to lean in close and count her fingers and argue over whose nose she has. The house filled up in the days after the birth, relatives coming and going, gifts stacked near the door, the low, warm hum of a family receiving something new. Yanelly was exhausted the way all new mothers are exhausted, running on broken sleep and the fierce, consuming love that kicks in before you leave the hospital. She was 18 and doing it largely on her own, but she was doing it. Those who visited in those 3 weeks said she looked tired and happy in equal measure. She didn't know her sister was watching all of it with something other than joy. That's the part that's hardest to process, that Yanelly had no idea. There was no fight, no confrontation, no moment where she turned to Yanelly and sensed something wrong beneath the surface. She was too consumed being a mother, too focused on this tiny new life that needed her every hour of every day. She wasn't watching for danger inside her own home. Why would she be? You don't arm yourself against your sister. You don't lock your bedroom door against family. You sleep. And on the night of September 23rd, that's exactly what Yanelly did. She put Celine against her chest the way she had every night since coming home from the hospital. She closed her eyes in the bedroom she'd slept in for years. She never opened them again. She was 18 years old. Celine was 21 days old. Neither of them made it to morning. To understand what happened in that bedroom, you have to understand what was happening in that house for the 3 weeks before it. Yanelly and Yanelly grew up together, 2 years apart, Yanelly the older one, Yanelly still a teenager. Same parents, same kitchen, same front door. From the outside, a normal family, the kind of household nobody looks at twice. But the dynamic inside had shifted the moment Celine arrived. Before the baby, Yanelly held a position in that house, older sister, more established, the one who had been there longer, who knew the rhythms of the family, who occupied a particular kind of space. That position didn't vanish overnight, but it got crowded. The attention that moved freely through the household suddenly had somewhere to land, and it landed on Yanelly and her newborn daughter. Visitors came for Celine. Compliments went to Yanelly. Conversations revolved around the baby's weight, her sleep patterns, the way she looked more like one parent or the other. The house reorganized itself, quietly, naturally, the way families do, around the newest and most fragile person in the house. And Yanelly felt herself being moved to the edges of something she used to be at the center of. Family members who spoke to investigators described the tension in careful terms. Nothing dramatic, nothing they could point to as a red flag. Small things, a sharpness in Yanelly's tone when the baby was mentioned, a distance at meals, a way of leaving a room when visitors arrived that felt less like coincidence and more like a decision. No threats, no confrontations, nothing that rises to the level of something you report. That's the part that haunts everyone who knew this family. The feeling was visible, but not loud enough to act on. Nobody called anyone. Nobody pulled Yanelly aside and asked what was really going on beneath the surface. Because you don't, do you? You assume it will pass. You assume people process their feelings and come out the other side. You don't assume the alternative. But resentment that doesn't have anywhere to go doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It waits. And in the early hours of September 24th, while Yanelly slept with her daughter against her chest, whatever had been building beneath Yanelly's surface finally found its way out. Investigators pull the 911 recording and listen to it again. and again. They're not listening for what Yanelly says. They're listening for what she doesn't say, for the pauses that come a beat too late, for the steadiness in a voice that should be shaking itself apart. Most people who find a family member shot in their own home sound like they've lost the floor beneath them. Yanelly sounds like someone answering questions at a DMV counter. Gunshot residue swabs are collected from everyone in the house. Standard procedure. Nobody flinches, including Yanelly. Then the phone records come back. There are messages sent in the hours before the shooting, not panicked messages, not messages from someone lying awake unable to sleep. Deliberate communication, back and forth, a pattern of contact that directly contradicts the version of events she gave investigators, that she was asleep, heard shots, and called 911. The timeline starts to come apart at the seams. In a second interview, the details shift. The time she woke up changes. The reason she was already in the hallway changes. The number of shots she claims to have heard doesn't match the forensic evidence from the scene. Each inconsistency on its own is explainable. Trauma does strange things to memory, and investigators know that. But these inconsistencies only drift in one direction. Every changed detail moves her further from the bedroom. Every revised answer creates more distance between herself and the gun. That pattern has a name, and investigators recognize it immediately. Then the GSR results come back. Then Martin Arroyo Morales, Yanelly's boyfriend, surfaces not as a peripheral contact, but as a consistent presence in the phone records surrounding the shooting, not checking in afterward, active before. Detectives bring Yanelly back in for a third interview. This time they arrive with specifics, timestamps, message content, forensic details she has no way of knowing they've already confirmed. They lay it out slowly and watch her face as she realizes the scaffolding she built her story on is not going to hold. The calm that carried her through the 911 call, through the first interviews, through the early hours, starts to fracture. What's underneath it is not the grief of a sister. It's the expression of someone who genuinely believed they had gotten away with it. They hadn't. When the story finally collapses, it doesn't collapse slowly. Under the weight of the phone records, the forensic evidence, and the crumbling timeline, Yanelly can no longer hold the pieces together. Investigators say she admits her involvement, and then what had looked like a crime of sudden rage reveals itself to be something far colder. Martin Arroyo Morales, Yanelly's boyfriend, was not on the edges of this. He was inside it. Text messages recovered from both phones show communication in the hours before the shooting, not casual conversation, but coordination, planning, a decision that had been made, discussed, and acted on deliberately while Yanelly slept with her daughter against her chest. This was not a moment that got out of hand. This was a plan. A 9mm handgun, multiple shots, a mother and her 3-week-old daughter killed where they lay. The shooter stood close enough to see Celine's face, close enough that there was no question of who was in that bed or what the outcome would be. When prosecutors lay out the motive in court, it lands without softness. Jealousy. Not a financial dispute, not a history of violence or abuse, not fear, not self-defense, not a threat of any kind, just the corrosive, unbearable feeling that her sister was receiving something she wasn't, attention, love, the warmth a new baby pulls into a room, and the decision that she would rather end it than continue living alongside it. 2 lives for that. Yanelly was 18. She had 3 weeks with her daughter. 3 weeks of middle-of-the-night feedings and learning what each cry meant and holding something she had made and loved entirely, and a conversation between 2 people with a phone and a gun took all of it in a single morning. When the arrests come, the family is handed something no parent should ever have to carry. One daughter in a casket, one daughter in handcuffs, one funeral, one trial. The same parents forced to sit with both realities at the same time, to grieve and to rage simultaneously, without any place to put either. There is no outcome here that makes this family whole. That was decided on September 24, 2022, not from a stranger, not by accident, but someone who shared their blood and sat at their table and knew where the bedroom was. The vigil is quiet. Candles line the sidewalk outside the Fresno home. Baby photos are taped to poster board. Yanelly holding Celine, both of them still so new to each other. Stuffed animals sit at the base of the fence. Neighbors stand close together and say very little, because the words that exist for something like this are not words anyone wants to say out loud. How do you explain a mother and her 3-week-old shot in their own bedroom by someone who grew up in that same house? How do you make sense of resentment so deep that it crosses into something irreversible? There's no framework for it that feels adequate, no explanation that makes the candles flicker any less in the dark. Yanelly Solorio-Rivera is convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Martin Arroyo Morales is charged for his role in the planning and execution of the murders. The legal process runs its course the way it's supposed to: evidence, testimony, verdict, sentence. But a sentence doesn't return anything. It doesn't give Yanelly her 20s. It doesn't give Celine a first birthday, a first word, a first day of school, a life. It doesn't undo a single second of what happened in that bedroom. What it does is confirm what everyone already knew. This was wrong, deliberate, unforgivable. The house on that Fresno street still stands. People drive past it every day without knowing. Neighbors have moved on the way neighborhoods do, because time doesn't stop for grief and the world doesn't pause to acknowledge every place where something terrible happened. But the family carries it every day. The parents who woke up that morning with 2 daughters and a grandchild and ended it with none of them. The relatives who held Celine in those first 3 weeks and now hold only the memory of it. This is what family violence looks like when it doesn't announce itself. No history of abuse, no police calls, no warning loud enough to act on. Just a feeling that grew in silence until it became something unthinkable. And a 911 call placed by the person who caused it. Steady-voiced, deliberate, already constructing the lie. The truth came out anyway. It always does. If this story reached you, if it stirred something in your chest, don't let it fade when the video ends. These cases remind us that danger can hide in the everyday, that silence can cost lives, and that sometimes the smallest voice might be the one that saves someone. If you know anybody in a violent or unsafe situation, don't wait. Say something. Call for help. Speak up. Your voice might be the one thing standing between someone and a tragedy like this. Drop a comment. Share this video. Keep their names alive. And we'll be back with another story that needs to be told. This is the Exposed Crime. Stay safe out there.